kick us off in a second.
Good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Call Me Crazy. Today we have on Tony Loyd. He is a coach for entrepreneurs and he helps people find their purpose in life. If you feel like you're struggling and you work every day, but you want to find a social or purpose-driven mission, that's what Tony kind of helps people do. And we're really excited to hear from you, how you got started and how you help entrepreneurs like us. Welcome.
Thanks. It's really great to be here. I did not know you guys until I found you, I think, on matchmaker.com.
Yeah. Matchmaker's been great.
FM.
Yeah.
It's not the matchmaker.com.
Yeah.
It's
not
matchmaker.
It's not a dating website.
No, when I first signed up for it, I went to my wife. I said, okay, now if you look at my browsing history, you're going to see that I'm on this site called Matchmaker. Let me show you what that is.
Yeah. No, but it's been great. I really like it because it's easier to find people that are interested in coming on podcast.
Yeah.
And it's always hard because sometimes people like want to come on or they don't. And then people here on Matchmaker, they want to come on, they want to talk. And it's great.
And a lot of them also have podcasts. So it's a great way to share, people that love podcasts can hear the other person's as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a new fan.
Great.
Right.
Well, welcome to our family.
The Call Me Crazy Dope Dog.
Call Me Crazy Dope Dog family. So tell us your background, Tony. What did you do, and how do you transition into this awesome coaching?
Yeah. So I had a Fortune 500 career. I did, technical consulting about 150 years ago, when we're still riding dinosaurs and stuff. But then I went into Fortune 500 executive position and I worked with some of the biggest brands on earth. But at some point, you kind of see how the sausage is made. And I had a lot of conflict around the fact that we were giving first priority to shareholders, which meant when it came to choices and trade-offs, everybody else lost, right? So the earth loses, the customers lose, everybody loses if they come into conflict with the shareholders, the people who own the stock in the company. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about there's got to be a better way, and I started looking for people who were doing better. And I started to find people who were making a dollar and a difference. They were making money, but the money was in service to a mission. And those people are called social entrepreneurs. So I'd never heard of social entrepreneurship. I didn't know anything about it. But I left my corporate job. I started pursuing this idea. I teach at the University of Minnesota in their Grand Challenge curriculum. I wrote a book about it. I have a podcast about social entrepreneurship, and so that's kind of how I got into all this. So I'll just pause there and let you jump in with any questions.
Yeah, I had a question. So with, say, the Fortune 500 companies, here on the bio we wrote, Buffalo Wild Wings, big companies. Yeah. What do you see that they could do in the future that could be a little bit more, social, like a social entrepreneur? Because I think
maybe they didn't start as social, but they want to be.
Yeah, and I think there's such different beasts too that it's, when you're smaller, I feel like you do have a lot more flexibility, and then when you are that big, it's hard to kind of move the boat in that direction sometimes. Right. But I'm just curious, what your thoughts are from being inside, what they can do.
Yeah, well, there are, not all corporations are evil. So there's that, that kind of stereotype. We go, ooh, the big evil corporation, right? So, but, most companies have a corporate social responsibility program where they try to use their philanthropic dollars. They volunteer. They have employees volunteer for different things. They partner with nonprofits. There's a group called the Social Venture Partners where people can do skills volunteering. So not just go down and fill up bags at a soup kitchen or something, I don't know. But you can actually, if you're great at marketing, well, there are nonprofits or startups who are social enterprises who need that kind of skill set. If you're great at finance, well, they need that kind of skill set. So there are a lot of ways that people can get involved from their corporate job, and corporations can involve more people. Here's the challenge, though. Most large corporations are C corporations, which mean that the shareholders are the ones who really own the company. And so whatever the shareholders say, that's really what happens. And that, if you own stock in a company, you'll get a card in the mail every now and again said, we're going to have a vote, and do you want to give somebody your proxy in order to, and stuff like that. We don't pay that much attention to it. Or we own stock in an index fund that owns lots and lots and lots of companies inside that index fund. And so the way that these things get implemented sometimes is what will happen is sometimes there's an activist shareholder, and that activist shareholder will come in and they'll say, you're not maximizing profit enough. And then they will sue the company, or they'll force their way onto the board or something like that. And so, being in the executive suite, and I've been in the executive suite, it is an impossible task to say we have to give short shrift to our shareholders, right? So that's a challenge. And you do have a legal fiduciary responsibility. So that's a challenge. But there are companies who have chosen to either start or to become what's called a B corporation, a benefit corporation. And so there is this other kind of construct. So there's C corps and S corps and LLCs and all these different kinds of ways. But there is one that is a fairly new way, which is called a B Corp or a benefit corporation. And you write into your charter to say, look, shareholders, we are going to take care of the planet, our employees, the communities in which we serve, because we think that creates values and customer loyalty, et cetera. And so if you're investing in us, you have to know that up front. So there are companies that go that way, or, private companies don't have the shareholder value kind of pressure, or small startups don't have that, or et cetera, et cetera. But, there are ways to do this in a way that you protect yourself as a company, while at the same time, you're able to do the kinds of mission-driven work that you want or need to do.
And from your path from Fortune 500 executive to this coaching, where did you kind of fall in or read, or what were your passions to kind of drive you that way? Because, when you get into something, I feel like a lot of times you jump right in.
Yeah.
Did you start, interviewing a lot of people inside B Corps, or did you start, investing in companies? How was that approach?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. So where I first thought about or heard about social entrepreneurs was it was Christmas, and I think this was 2010. And I was in Chicago with my wife. We were at a nice hotel. I think it was a Talbot Hotel, very nice hotel. And one of my favorite things to do is to read a newspaper, like a tactile kind of take a piece of paper and put it in your hand and read it. And so it was around Christmas morning in 2010. And I was reading the New York Times, because I'm in this hotel and they have all kinds of newspapers. And in the Times, there was this article, and it was about this woman who lived in rural Kenya who owned a cell phone. And there was no electricity in her village. And so she used to get on the back of a motorcycle taxi, and she would go half a day to a city. She would leave her cell phone with someone to charge it. She would get back on the motorcycle taxi, come back home. And then the next day she'd repeat this and go back and pick up her cell phone and bring it home. And now she'd be really careful about, charging the phone, make sure that it was still charged and turn it off and all that. And what she was doing was she was checking the prices of chickens in nearby villages, because that way she could sell her poultry at maximum price and she could go around. Well, one day, a guy from a company called Barefoot Power came into town, and they sold these small little solar panels. And so she could put up this solar panel on her house, and it's a small little thing. And it could run a light at night, or it could charge her cell phone, or she could even charge her neighbors to charge their cell phones. And what had happened was, prior to that time, she'd been buying kerosene to burn at night. So kerosene is a dirty fuel. It has indoor pollution. Lots of people die young from lung cancer or other impacts from kerosene. Plus, her kids couldn't study well by it. So by getting this solar panel, first, in 3 months' price of kerosene, she had paid for the solar panel. And then her kids' school grades started going up because they could read later into the night. She started making money from this because her neighbors would come over and she'd charge them a few shillings to plug in their phone and to charge their phone. And so it was like this win-win-win-win-win business model. And it just it just blew my mind. It was like, wait a minute, this is a real thing. And so that was the article that I read that started me down this path of trying to figure out, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And then in March of 2015, I went to a class at University of Minnesota. It was like a public offered class. And they talked about two things. They talked about human-centric design, and they talked about social entrepreneurship. And so that was where I first met social entrepreneurs. And because of my business skills, I started mentoring them. And so that's how I kind of got on the inside track. And I started meeting all these social entrepreneurs. They were telling me their stories. And one day I went, this would make a great podcast. So I started recording these stories. We're now on about episode 300 of my podcast, Social Entrepreneur. Plus, I took some of those stories, the first 150, and I put them into a book, and the book became a bestseller. So it's just been this sort of mind-blowing kind of journey for me.
Is that the book Really Good Advice?
Crazy Good Advice.
Advice.
Yeah.
I love the story. And I wonder, probably now social entrepreneurship's defined. Like you had a course on it, but back, even before 2010, your story in Kenya, I bet there were entrepreneurs out there trying to do this, but it didn't even have a name. And who knows, now it's becoming, it's taken seriously now. Do you think it's been happening for decades and decades, but we just haven't defined it?
Right. Well, I think if you go all the way back to the original business model, right? So somebody in a village grows vegetables and their neighbors can't grow enough vegetables, or their garden failed. And so they go to a marketplace and they sell these vegetables, and the neighbors buy them, and there's a benefit, right? And there's this sort of holistic, natural trade system that's happening. But what happened is, over a period of time, we started building these businesses where we extract value from a community and we take it somewhere else. And that is kind of an unnatural business model. So what we're really doing with social entrepreneurship is we're returning to the root of what it is to be a good business person.
Did you have a question?
Are there a couple pillars or elements that a social business should keep in the front of mind as they're either building their company or as they're making decisions? Does it have to be hyper local to give back to the community? Does it have to be a certain type of product? Are there any guidelines? I mean, obviously it could be done in so many ways, but
I would say so every business that you start, you're going to ask yourself a series of fundamental questions. So number one, who do we serve? Number two, what's their problem? Number three, how do we solve that problem? Number four, how do we make money from that so that we sustain and grow our company? If you were starting a hot dog stand or you were starting a major corporation, those are the first four questions you have to ask. Who do we serve? What's their problem? How do we solve the problem? How do we make money from that? The thing that, and you already know, because you're business owners, so you know how hard that is to just get that right and to get launched and to start growing your business. Now, imagine if while you were doing that, you were trying to solve homelessness, or while you were doing that, you were trying to solve hunger or clean water or health or education or something else on top of that. Mm-hmm. So I would say, it's kind of like the Hippocratic Oath: first, do no evil, right? So if, we all know the story of Tom's shoes, right? And how, or do you know the story of Tom's shoes? I imagine you do. Yeah.
You can tell though, in case somebody doesn't know that.
So, Blake, bless his heart, he has been like the poster boy for things not to do. And so, he's a great guy. His heart's in the right place, but he went off to Africa and he started, this business where he was, if you buy a pair of Tom's shoes, we're going to give away shoes to kids in Africa. Well, that's great, except because he didn't do enough homework, he didn't know that by doing that, he was crippling the shoe industry in Africa. Like the local shoemakers were going, dude, what's the deal? I'm making my living doing this, and you're coming in here with free shoes. So, Blake had to eventually change his business model. Today he does fair trade coffee, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd say, principle number one is first, do no harm. Principle number two.
That element of
I didn't know that element of the story at all.
Gave shoes back, but I didn't.
Yeah, which is a cool thing, right?
Yeah,
when they first started, they just, look, we've all made mistakes as entrepreneurs. We have all stepped in it, and so that was what he did. I'm going to tell you in a second, like 4 different ways that you can use a business model to do social good. But let me just finish answering your question here. So first, do no harm. And then second of all, if you're going to take on a social problem, it's important to understand why that problem has persisted for such a long period of time, right? So if you want to solve youth homelessness, that's fantastic. Knock yourself out. But it's a really complex issue. Mm-hmm. And there are so many factors, and every person becomes homeless from their own path. And so you really have to do that kind of systems thinking, the complex problem analysis, where you really understand from multiple angles what's going on. So, it has all the elements of a startup, and yet it has 2 more layers of deep complexity over and above a regular startup.
And just from the sounds of it, just getting a startup going or a small business, it's already hard. What do a lot of these fail because it's so complex to continue going, because you're trying to do more than what's normal at the beginning sometimes, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to do this, give away that, do that. Is it harder?
It is harder. It is harder. Let's just face it. Let's not blow sunshine about this. It is harder because you're trying to do 2 things at once. And at some point, you're going to come to this conflict where you say, are we impact first or are we money first? Because if we don't make money, we can't sustain our impact. And if we don't make an impact, then what's the point of making money? Mm-hmm. So you have to make hard choices and trade-offs in order to do this.
And what have some scenarios been that you've seen that are really hard, where a business has to decide, we have to go make money now because we're not going to be able to support just the business itself?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the places where people get in trouble is when their impact is a second thought. It's the thing that they're trying to layer on top of something else. And if you can bake the social impact into the business, if this impact doesn't happen, the business doesn't happen, right? If you can bake it in, then you're going to survive no matter what. So, there are some companies that make an impact by what they sell. And I'll give you an example of that. There's a guy out of Argentina. He's now in the LA area, but his name is Sebastian Saju, and he was concerned about unrecyclable plastic. And what happens is, when you get a bag of chips, the bag is made from laminate plastic, which means they take multiple kinds of plastic and they layer them together so that you can't separate them. And because it's mixed waste, you can't recycle it. And so toffee wrappers, all kinds of things are made from this laminate plastic. So his big concern was, what are we going to do with all this? Because all this plastic is going into the environment. Well, he talked to a lot of people. He went to Europe. He looked at a bunch of different business models. He, did a lot of research. And then he came up with this idea to grind up that plastic and to make what he calls smart gravel. And smart gravel is it's this gravel made from recycled plastic. And so it is highly sought after by the construction industry because it is like 10 times better at thermal insulation. It is lighter, so they can save cost in shipping. It is better sound insulation. And if you build something using this smart gravel, you get LEED certification for your building because you are or LEED certification points because you're using a recycled material. So now he takes this plastic out of the environment. He makes this smart gravel. He sells it by the truckload. He's not making a tiny impact. He's selling it by the truckload to these construction companies. And by doing that, he's making a difference by what he sells. And so the more of it he sells, then the bigger the impact. Now, if push comes to shove, you cannot take the social impact out of that business. No. The social impact is the business, right? So the more you can bake it into your core, then the bigger the impact you can have, and the less you're going to be tempted with those choices and trade-offs.
Yeah, that's a great example.
That one. That's
Thanks.
That's a real lemonade out of lemon story.
I'm telling you.
Great idea. Too.
And now is it like it's almost like that at the parks, right? When you like step on the little gravel, it's kind of bouncy, stuff like that. Yeah, that's a great, I mean, that, and a lot of people are doing that too, where they're kind of taking these materials that no one wants and turning them into something people want. And that's a great business model too. Cause like it's going to go to the trash anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a woman named Susan. No, wait. Oh gosh, I'm going to call the wrong name if I try it. So, but she has a company called Evernu, EVRNU, and I'll think of her name here in a minute. Stacy something. Anyway, she was a buyer for some major clothing companies, and she went to China to the factory to just talk about the next season and the new colors and what kind of material they needed, etc. And when she got there, it was like they were dumping the effluent out into the river, and there was this haze of toxin so thick that when she was sitting in the conference room inside the factory, that there was like a haze hanging in the room of toxic gases. And so she's like, what business am I in? What am I doing? So she went home and she worked with a chemist, and they came up with this process to take cotton fibers from discarded clothing and to break it down into its components and reconstruct it into a material that can be, you can weave it, you can sew it, you can cut it, you can dye it. It's just like a cotton material. And so she's got a prototype with Levi's for a pair of jeans. She's got a prototype with I'm trying to think of who it is, a sporting goods clothing manufacturer. So every year, this is, the dirty secret of the apparel industry is, let's say that you have your fast fashion and you wear it out, or it gets a little hole or whatever, or the color's fading. So you take it to Goodwill, Salvation Army, and you go here, and you go, oh, some other kid is going to wear that. No, that's not what happens. Most of the clothing that goes to those places either end up going to some place to be sold as bulk material, and then that gets used in kind of industrial things, but the vast majority goes to the landfill. I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So she's solving this by the more of that she can take out of the waste stream, then the more good she's going to do. So again, it's what she sells, right?
Yeah. And let's take Dope Dog, for example, because maybe you can help us do it even more. We sell CBD dog treats, and our mission is to make dogs happier. So we donate a percentage of sales every month. And then we also donate to a lot of rescues, do a lot of partnership with rescues. But I guess, thinking about it and talking to you, how could we make it more impactful? Because right now it does almost seem like it's just there in a way, even though we really do, like, that was one of our things we really wanted to do. And we partnered with tons and tons of rescues. But how do you make it more
than just money donated?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Because a lot of companies can layer in 1% back, and that's like at minimum. Like, how can you make that more impactful?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's my question.
Well, first of all, let me just applaud you for asking the question, right?
Yeah.
Because you're kind of putting yourself in a tough place to ask a question. So I've mentioned what you sell. That's one way that you can make an impact. The other three ways that you can make an impact, and you mentioned one of them, is what you share, right? So I can give you some other examples of companies that are sharing, which is important. But then how you staff and how you source. So first of all, where you're getting your raw material, is there a fair trade kind of chain going back? Are you, what about regenerative farming that's being used farther back in your value chain? So as you think about how you source, where your supplies come from, and looking back across that chain, are your suppliers paying a living wage? Right. So there are all these things that you could look at through your supply chain, through sourcing, fair trade, natural, organic, regenerative agriculture, et cetera. Then the other thing is how you staff, right? So as you make staffing decisions, who are you hiring? Who are you giving opportunities to? Are there people who normally don't get an opportunity for a job? I'll tell you a great story on this. So I'm in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and in Minneapolis, there's a grilled cheese sandwich restaurant. Now, first of all,
I love it.
You've got my attention with grilled cheese sandwiches, right?
I'm in.
Yeah. So Emily Hunt Turner is the one who started that. And she used to be an attorney with like HUD, with Housing and Urban Development, right? And so she was an attorney, and she dealt with a lot of housing issues. And she was there firsthand, seeing people like get kicked out of low income housing and pushed to the street, and all kinds of terrible things happening. But one of the primary things that was happening is somebody gets arrested for whatever reason, often drug charges. They go to prison, they come back. Now they have to find housing right away. Two, they have to find employment right away. And a lot of people, they get out early. If they don't find housing and employment right away, they go right back into prison, because that is the rule. You get out under the condition you find a place to live and you get a job. Well, so this really bothered her. So what she did was she started this grilled cheese sandwich restaurant, because she's like, what skills do I have? What's the one thing I can do? What do people brag on me about? Well, I make a good grilled cheese sandwich.
Yeah.
So she started this grilled cheese sandwich restaurant, and she hires people who are coming out of the justice system. She trains them with a culinary school. And now those people are blowing her business up, because they'll get into the kitchen and they'll go, you know what if we put some jerk chicken on this? What if we put some whatever else on it? I have this Indian recipe I've been wanting to try. And so this place is off the wall, great food on the basic grilled cheese sandwich. So she makes a difference by how she staffs.
And it's tough too, because I guess since we are so small still, like basically day to day, it's myself and Aaron running the company. And as we expand, that's definitely something to look at too, because it's hard sometimes to think about it or move forward. And I was curious, because I think what we do, maybe we could do more and think about that. Cause I never thought about like where it's coming from. It said, organic ingredients, human grade ingredients. And, we think they're high quality. And then maybe we go that step further and be like, okay, where are they really coming from? Maybe it's John and whatever's farm in Pennsylvania that we now use, and he's on our bag. And that's definitely something to think about. I mean, but then I also, there's like two parts of me where it's like, I really want to do that. And then I watched, did you ever watch that one where he, the McDonald's one where he ate McDonald's for 30 days?
Oh, yeah.
So there was like Super Size Me 3, and he started the chicken thing. Yeah. Where he started a all organic, pasture raised, free range. And, there are all these weird words that he could use because technically they were all true. Yeah. And a lot of it is marketing. So sometimes it's hard to differentiate the marketing aspect of it. Like if you know, all organic, free range, it's like, oh wow, this must be great chicken. And so then you think like, okay, how do you really do that without seeming too marketing, but really having that meaning behind it?
That's why you need to have real social entrepreneurs coached by Tony. So you can make sure you're asking the right questions if you're led by people with a conscience.
Yeah. You know, there's a B certification. And there is I'll have to look up the site for it, but you can go online and take the free self-assessment on B certification. It's like, I don't know, maybe 48 questions or something. And so they'll ask you about your employment practices, and they'll ask you about your supply chain, and they'll ask you about, you know, government regulations and how you go about meeting those or whatever, you know. So they have this self-assessment that you can take. And then later, if you want to really go deep, then you can become a certified B Corp. And that is that you're going to subject yourself to some scrutiny to say, okay, we're going to look all the way back through your supply chain. We're going to look at, you know, all of your employment policies. How do you share the wealth within your organization? You know, what's the ratio between the CEO's pay and the lowest employee's pay? And so there is a free online assessment. Just, you know, look up B certifications assessment, and you should be able to find it.
Cool. That sounds great. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I didn't even know there was a B Corp. So, and that's something that, you know, there's a lot of nonprofits and everything like that. And I think this is an interesting view at it. Is there do you know off the top of your head, like the tax breakdown? Is it the same as an S Corp or a C Corp, or do you get taxed differently? Because
no, it's all the same.
All the same.
You know, it's so I have an S Corp myself. So, and I have an S Corp because I wasn't planning on bringing on shareholders. And because I wasn't bringing on shareholders, I didn't need the B Corp structure. So I'm funding the company myself. So, but an S Corp and a B Corp are very, very similar in tax structure.
Okay. Because we're an LLC, and, you know, if we need to go to a C Corp, are you saying that a B Corp would be almost equivalent or a counterpart to a C Corp?
It can be, yeah. I mean, so there is a Delaware B Corp. You know, lots of companies incorporate in Delaware, and because they have like common structure around how do you treat corporations. And there is a Delaware B Corp, and you could take a quick look at that. Or I have some attorneys. If you ever need an attorney, I have some people who are experts at this I could refer you to.
Yeah, no, we got to look into that. So before we wrap up, we want to hear your Call Me Crazy story, Tony. So, you know, our podcast is Call Me Crazy. We all started a business. So is there anything you can share with us that maybe will give some inspiration to our listeners?
Well, I think, so first of all, you know, I wrote this book called Crazy Good Advice, and the story of how the name came about was I was interviewing a guy out of Seattle, and he runs an incubator, and the name of the incubator is Fledge. And so this is a guy who was started and sold 6 businesses, and now he runs this incubator that has hundreds of businesses that have come through. He's helped these companies to grow and scale and get investment and go on. And he said, look, when you tell your family and your friends and your loved ones that you're going to start a business, and they tell you that you're crazy, they're right. I mean, let's just face it. You have to be crazy to do this kind of stuff. So in order to do something like this, you might as well make the biggest impact possible. So that's where the story of Crazy Good Advice comes from, or where the title came from. But like in 2015 through 2018, I was working like a maniac. What I did was I had this really strong work ethic, and it's how I ended up, you know, vice president in large organizations, et cetera. And so I was working like a maniac. And then when I left my corporate role, I brought that work ethic with me. and I just about killed myself. I was doing the, roll out of bed at 4:00 in the morning and work. And then, finally my wife would come in and say, look, I'm going to eat dinner. Do you want to come in and eat dinner or not? Because I was still working and I was podcasting 3 times a week and then, had a lot of different things going. So at the end of 2018, I had a breakfast with a friend of mine, Michael. And Michael's like, he asked me common question, right? How you doing?
Yeah.
And I said, honest to God, I am depressed. And he was like, so what does that look like for you? What do you mean when you say you're depressed? And I said, I don't know if I want to be alive. And when those words came out of my mouth, first of all, the look on his face was like, whing, right?
Yeah.
And then hearing the words come out of my own mouth and seeing the look on his face, it hit me really hard what I had just said. And so, right away, I just said, you know what? Hey, listen, I'm not planning on harming myself. This isn't a self-harm conversation. I just don't get the point. I've been doing this kind of purpose-driven work, and I've been doing it for so long, and I just kind of feel like I am at the end of myself. And so the primary mistake that I had made was I believed that if you're trying to do something that has a big enough why, a big enough purpose, that self-care wasn't that important, that you would be uplifted, that purpose would drive your passion, which would get you to do those crazy hours and do all the things required in order to run multiple businesses and all that. And so I spent 2019 kind of going Control Alt Delete, right? I had to back up and I had to say, why do you do what you do and how are you doing it? And so I did a self-assessment. I call it Thrive, Connect, Contribute. And so I assessed myself in 10 areas, everything from physical health, mental health, intellectual, spiritual, and then my relationships, right? So as a parent, as a husband, my relationship to my community, and then my contribution. So my financial contribution, my vocation, my avocation that included my causes and places where I volunteered and all that. So I did this massive self-assessment at the beginning of 2019. And then in 2019, which wasn't 2020, which was a crazy year, but in 2019, I did this thing called my year of personal bests. And what I did was I just went back to the root and just said, if I were living on a scale of 1 to 10, if I were living my best life in these 10 different areas, what would that look like? And so by doing that, I built up my internal fortification so that when we went into 2020 and it was such a crazy year, I was solid. I was just like rooted down in who I am and what I'm here for and all that. Stanislavski has these 3. Stanislavski was this great teaching coach. And he has 7 questions, but you could boil it down to these 3. Who are you? Why are you here? What do you want? And honestly, if you can't answer those 3 questions, it's time to kind of back up and get inside and start doing that internal work. Because look, Michael and Aaron, you know this, 90% of success is internal work, right? You've got to be solid in here before everything else works out there. So, who are you? What do you want? Why are you here? And so that was my crazy story, that I was so off the rail. I wasn't even sure I wanted to be alive. And I really had to back up and I had to answer those kinds of questions and do the self-assessment and then figure out how on a scale of 1 to 10, I was going to try to live my best life in all 10 of those areas.
And that was deep. I mean, it really does mean a lot too, because it is tough. It is mentally straining and tough to run your own business and you never know where, what the break looks like. And I think it's a struggle sometimes. Like you're just foot on the gas and you're going. You're like, well, when do I take off for the pit stop or when do I do this? But Any recommendations on like books or what you did that year to really I mean, you could also email us, we can put it in the description if you don't want to go
there's a few. So one that really helped me with my kind of like my mental health and all that, there's a book called give me a second. It's by Johan Hari, Johan. Give me 1 second. I'll tell you the name of the book.
I was going to try to see if I could look it up too on
Lost Connections. That's it. Lost Connections. Johan Hari, Lost Connections, Why You Are Depressed and How to Find Hope. So I love that book because he talks about the fact that what we do most of the time is kind of unnatural. Right. So we isolate ourselves inside of these buildings so that the weather outside doesn't get to us. We live under unnatural light. We work in these not natural communities that are these, corporations. So a lot of what we do, it's kind of like, we haven't really, we're eating fake food. It's like that. Right. So our lives, sometimes we live these lives that are not connected well. So I grabbed one more thing before we came in here, and now I know why I brought it. So I wrote this thing recently about the 7 elements of thriving. And so in order for us to thrive, right, we need love. And I use that word very liberally because it's about meaningful connections and shared values. If we're going to thrive, we need to have a sense of feeling significance. So being a sense of being seen by others. We need a sense of security, right, in our persons and ourselves. We need variety. We need a sense of contribution, that we're giving back, that we're making a difference, we're making an impact. We need a sense of agency so that we feel like, we have some choice in our situations. And then we need growth, that we're achieving mastery in something. And so I wrote this the other day, these 7 elements of thriving, and I started thinking about my corporate life and how often those things were restricted, right? So your growth opportunities, your sense of agency, the fact that you're making a contribution that matters, that you're seen, that you feel significant, that, there's a lot of variety in your work, or you feel secure in your work, or that love is in the workplace, So as you're building companies and as I'm building companies, I think about these 7 elements. If I'm going to grow a company that matters, I want this in my company. I want people to freely use the word love. Now, I get that there are creepy things that people can do, that, I'm doing it out of love, right?
Yeah.
So I get all that. But I do think that if we're really rooted in like shared values, if we're really rooted in all that, then we can, we can create environments. We can use entrepreneurship and business growth as a context that can hold all kinds of things. So if we create those kinds of communities that thrive, then all kinds of amazing things can come out of it. So anyway, that's a book that I would recommend. I mentioned Johan Hari's book, but then one more that I just started reading this last week, and I've read it 4 times now in the last week, and it's called Turning Pro.
Turning Pro. Okay.
Yeah. And Stephen Pressfield. So the War of Art, he wrote The War of Art. You guys will appreciate this. I feel like sometimes there are books that chase me around until I read them, like read me. Yeah, I don't have time for you. Read me. Well, The War of Art was a book that has been chasing me around forever. I knew I needed to read it. And then recently, a friend of mine sent me an email, and in the email, she said, I bought you this book. It's on Kindle. It's called Turning Pro. It's by Stephen Pressfield. And by the way, here's a $25 Amazon gift card if you want it in Audible or paperback or some other form. I think you need to be reading this book. And it was the middle section that has been extracted out of The War of Art. So
okay.
like this thing has been chasing me around forever. And so I finally read it. And now I've read it like 4 or 5 times in the last week. And I'm obsessed with this book.
Oh, that's great. We're definitely going to get
check it out. And let us know the name of your podcast so everyone can follow you. And we'll also include that in the bottom because you're full of knowledge. I love it.
I've been called full of things before, but it's never knowledge. But
it's really great.
Yeah. So Social Entrepreneur is the primary podcast. And then I have a second one called Thrive, Connect, Contribute. So Social Entrepreneur is about how to use business to do good. We tell positive stories from underrepresented voices focused on solutions. And then Thrive, Connect, Contribute is about stories of resilience, right? So people who thrive in life, connect with others, and contribute to the world in the face of adversity. So those are the podcasts.
That's great. Yeah. And I just listened to, right before this, I was listening to the episode 306, the one with the baby deaths with the cradle.
Yeah.
That was, she really got into it. It was like really strong right at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah. She's like, women die all over the world from childbirth, and that's unfair. It's like, hello to you too.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's strong. Tony, thank you so much for joining the podcast, TonyLoyd.com. And then we'll put everything in the description, links and everything. You can find it. And I think on your website right now, you can get the copy of your free book as well, right?
That's right.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, Tony.
All right. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Michael. Take care.